The ability to sort of sift out what's important and what's not important, and the discipline to be able to say no, the confidence to say no, is, I think, one of the most important skills you can have.
Hey, Matt D'Avella here, and welcome to 3 Rules, a self-development podcast where I keep things practical, actionable, and most importantly, to the point. Each episode, I sit down with a guest to find out their 3 rules for finding success or happiness. For my first episode, I'm joined by Ryan Holiday, bestselling author of The Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy. His latest book is all about how building character can change your life. It's called Right Thing, Right Now. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is episode 1. I haven't done this before, so
Okay.
I'm still figuring out the rules of the show. What's rule number 1 for you?
My main rule has always been to always be reading. There's this idea, like, you can learn by trial and error, you can learn by experience, or you can learn from the experiences of others. So I always try to, whenever I'm going to do something or when I'm setting out in a different space, is I go like, what have smart people, who went before me said about this? And then also, what have like the big mistakes that people have made in that area? So I've just always been reading. And I think, you can live your one singular life, or you can live through all the lives of the people that went before you. So I've always been a huge reader. So that's my main thing. It's not just read a little bit, but like read a lot.
How much do you read?
All the time. Yeah. I'm always reading.
So I imagine that takes up time watching shows or on social media. Yeah,
look, I'm not saying you never do those other things, but like the time you spend watching the news and how much of that news becomes irrelevant or is changed or turns out to be not true versus reading something that stood the test of time for 100 years or 200 years or 1,000 years. I try to consume information with a long half-life, like information that's not going to be rendered irrelevant or proven untrue by subsequent events.
I just started doing that. I think maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I quit the news completely. And I think it's quite taboo to quit the news.
Yeah.
Because people are like, you got to stay informed. What do you mean you're not watching the news? You're not going to know what's happening.
Yeah, look, if you don't have a strong understanding of history, you're not going to be informed about what's happening in the present, even if you are watching the news, because you don't actually understand what these things mean or their significance or, the seriousness with which to take them. So I think reading is like the single best thing that you could do. Like, why would you not? I think there's a Mark Twain quote where he says, people who don't read have no advantages over people who cannot read. And so like you have this incredible ability, right? And do you use it or not? To me, that's like the most important question.
What's rule number 2?
So who are the sort of mentors or teachers in your life? Who are you seeking out that's been in the position that you have been in before? And how are you availing yourself of what they have learned also the hard way or what they have experienced?
Right.
Like I think too many people are just sort of winging it or trusting themselves as opposed to going like, who sort of cleared this path before me? Who can open doors for me? So I'm just a big believer in mentorship. Like I didn't become a writer because I loved writing. I became a writer because I was an assistant or an apprentice to a writer who taught me how the craft of the thing works. And then that was the person who, introduced me to people in the industry, who helped me get my first book deal. Who is going ahead of you and how are you availing yourselves of that?
Right. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to find a mentor?
It's important that you realize like mentorship isn't like this official thing. So people go like, will you be my mentor? And that's just not how it works. It's like you wouldn't go into a bar and just be like, will you be my girlfriend? Like, will you marry me? You don't just ask people, right? It's a relationship that begins and then ensues and develops over time. In retrospect, I apprenticed under Robert Greene, but really I started as like an intern and then I became an assistant. It was this thing that developed over time. And if I hadn't shown up and done a good job, if we hadn't hit it off, if we hadn't developed a familiarity with each other, then it just would have ended and it wouldn't have been that. And so I think sometimes people think these things are more official than they are, as opposed to like, it's like I'll get this, like people write in, they'll be like, hey, can I ask you a question? And it's like, you just wasted your question.
you had your shot.
Yeah. Just like a mentorship can start as small as meeting someone or bumping into someone or sending an email and just asking a question, getting an answer. And then what you do with that is up to you. Where it goes from there is up to you. But you're not going to get some busy, successful person to agree to give you an hour of their time a week. Or, it's not this formal relationship. It's something that develops over time. Yeah. And by the way, your mentors don't necessarily have to be alive, or you don't ever have to meet them in person. It can be over email. It can be over text. It can be you see them once annually at a conference. It can be any form that ends up benefiting, the student from the master.
I think I heard this on the Tim Ferriss show, and I think it was Derek Sivers that said it. But it was like basically whenever he has a question for one of his mentors, he'll write out basically what he thinks their response will be. So he'll fully kind of sketch out exactly what he imagines that phone call going like, and then he realizes he doesn't need to call them.
Yeah, that's really great.
He's like, well, these are really important people. And they're, not to say that he couldn't call them or hop on the phone, but does he want to distract them with something that's trivial or small that he actually could figure out himself?
Yes. And using what you know of them or of their work as a way of just getting outside yourself and your problem and your situation. That's what a mentor is there for. So But yeah, maybe you don't actually have to literally interact with them to get that. I love that.
I've always been the kind of person that's like, I'm going to do it myself. I don't need your help. And also there's also something vulnerable about approaching somebody and saying I have no idea what I'm doing. I need some guidance. The first big time I did it was, I told you about my doing powerlifting for 100 days and going to Sebastian Orb, who's just incredible trainer, one of the best strength coaches in the world. And the progress that I made over 100 days, I never could have had if I did it myself.
Yeah, look, you need someone who can see you from the outside, who's been in the position that you're in, but also in the position after yours and the one after yours. You think about that coach, obviously he's helping you and he's specifically helping you, but he has helped some version of you 1,000 times. So he knows when you're going to go this way, when you're going to go that way. You want someone who's gotten their reps on students like you before.
I'm going to be back with the third and final rule in a moment, but first, one of the ways I'm supporting this podcast is through Patreon. By becoming a patron, you get access to the full unedited episodes of the show. This conversation with Ryan Holiday actually went on for a full hour as we covered topics for other YouTube videos I'm making, covering everything from parenting to stoicism and how to become a better writer. As a patron, you'll also get additional unused footage from my YouTube videos and access to a members-only area where you can ask me questions for my Patreon-exclusive AMA podcast. And most importantly, you'll feel good knowing that you're supporting a creator you like. And really, what other incentive do you need? Simply go to patreon.com/Matt D'Avella to support the show. That's patreon.com/Matt D'Avella. There's a link down in the description below. Thanks for considering. Let's move on to rule number 3.
My other rule is, and it's one I struggle with, so I don't always follow it, but as you get started, you have to say yes. You jump on every single opportunity. You do every single thing you can. That's how you break through. That's how you break out. That's how you get your reps. That's how you get good. And then very quickly you have to transition to a place where you say no all the time. Mm-hmm. To be great at something, it requires not being good at a bunch of other things, and it requires a lot of focus and attention on that main thing. Mm-hmm. I have a little sign in my office. It's actually between pictures of my kids, and it just says no. A sports psychologist gave it to me. And you're just going to have to say no a lot, because when you're saying yes to everything that's coming your way, first off, you're saying no to these other people, but you're also saying no to yourself. You're saying no to your health. You're saying no to your work. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of what are the essential things that you have to do? And then what are the inessential things? What are the obligations? What are the distractions? What are the things that people unquestioningly do, but don't need to do, that don't really move the needle? And the ability to sort of sift out what's important and what's not important, and the discipline to be able to say no, the confidence to say no, is, I think, one of the most important skills you can have.
Do you have any examples of things that you even currently say no to? Do you have blanket no's for anything?
So I write this email every day, the Daily Stoic email, and it goes out now to almost 1 million people all over the world. Now, there was part of the reason why you are attracted to being on YouTube or writing or social media is you want the audience, you want to engage with the audience. But at some point it becomes so large that it's just humanly impossible, and then certainly unhealthy, to let that amount of information where people have access to your brain. So I've had to get much clearer at boundaries and rules about what I look at and don't look at, reviews, comments, view counts. Like I've tried to focus on doing the thing and not pay a lot of attention to what people are saying about the thing or questions they have about the thing.
You're right. Like there's just so much like hostility and negativity, especially on like Instagram comments. Like YouTube, I find like not too bad. I guess it just depends on what niche you're in and where you are on YouTube. But like how do you find that delicate balance of like needing the feedback and the reception and also like which helps you guide your content forward?
Yeah, I try to think of it as like kind of a 90-10 ratio. I remember on my first book, I was probably like 10% just like proud that I did it, that I did the thing that was exactly what I wanted to be. And then I was like 90% like, how did it do? Did it debut on the bestseller list? What did the reviews say? And I've tried, as I've done it longer and gotten better at it, I've tried to actually flip that ratio. There's a 10%. Obviously, look, if it doesn't sell, you're not going to keep doing them. If you get something wrong, you want to correct it. But I try to 90% be focused on the parts of it I controlled, which is what I put in, was it what I wanted to make? Did I say what I wanted to say? Did I leave it all sort of on the court, so to speak? And then 10%, like, how did it do? That's like, I want that to be like extra, not the main metric of whether I succeed or not. Because I'm sure you found this where you work really hard on something and it doesn't do amazing. It doesn't do 0 views, but it doesn't set any records. And then you do something that you didn't think was that great, or you didn't put that much time and it does really well. You don't want to let that skew your internal sense of what your best work is or not.
Yeah. I don't think we can't get any sympathy from anybody. They'd be like, oh, wow, you only got 100,000 views on that. So it's like, I understand that, but it's like at the end of the day, like it's that hedonic treadmill. Like you do get used to more and more and more and more. And I think like stripping back as much as possible and just focusing on the joy of the work that you create.
Yeah, this is kind of a different rule than the saying no, but I try to focus more on the verb than the noun. So like I focus on writing, doing the thing, making the stuff, less like how is it doing? How is it received? Being, the quote unquote writer. I want to be actually writing. So I just try to focus on the creative act, and I think less about the reception or the feedback, because look, yeah, there can be the really heartfelt stuff that fills you up, but there's a sensitivity there that also makes you vulnerable to, you're the worst, I hate you, You've fallen off. People are really good at finding, if they watch enough of your stuff, they can kind of sense like what you care about, and then they can hit you like right there. And then sometimes I'll just, when I do see them, I'll respond. I'll be like, I hope that made you feel better, And then the response is usually like, they didn't, it's usually the response is very nice after, because they were like, oh, I was just venting or whatever. And
you forgot there was a person behind that.
Exactly. Comment. And you have to remember that you're a person. You have to kind of create some barriers and some borders to keep yourself protected.
So that's the podcast. It's going to be, it's a short show.
I love
just
that.
Like a 15, 20-minute show.
That's smart.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the way that I see it is like, I had a podcast that was like all about like diving deep into like self-development, but it also talked a little bit about the creator economy. And this was like years ago. And like since then, there are so many amazing podcasts where people have these really long, like depth-filled conversations about self-development.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want something that's like short, like quick, easy takeaways.
I mean, even to go to the Derek Sivers thing, like what podcasts are is the opportunity to be a fly on the wall between two other people talking. Yeah. Like you're not having to ask questions. You're not having to do anything. You're just getting to passively listen. Yeah. Like so much of what I've learned from the mentors I've had were like, they invited me to a dinner they were going to, and I just sat there and didn't say anything, And so like, there are many ways to mimic that or to get most of the benefit of that. And podcasts are obviously a great way to do that too.
Yeah. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Daily Stoic on pretty much all platforms. That's where we send out the Daily Stoic email every day. And then I send out a parenting email every day at dailydad.com also.
I got the book right here.
Oh, amazing.
Daily Dad. Courage is Calling. I've got too many Ryan Holiday books in here. And I did not set those up just because you came here.
Oh, well, I'm honored.
Those are there. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come meet with me here in Sydney.
This is very cool.
Very cool to connect. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Yeah, you too.
If you want to get these rules summarized into a weekly newsletter, you can subscribe at mattdiavella.com/3rules.